Welcome to the Backlash, a weekly discussion about the past, present, and future of the Western world. I am your host, Rebecca Hargraves. You may know me from my YouTube channel, which is probably where you're watching me, Blonde in the Belly of the Beast. I'm joined by my co-hosts. I have the wonderful Dave Riley, activist, journalist, anything else? Father, maker of tea. Just joking, that was your wife.
My wife made the tea.
And Vince James.
Coffee
Drinker. And then we have Cameron McGregor. Hi, Cam.
Feliz Navidad.
almost goes by quick.
So we were going to talk about the JFK assassination, but I realized pretty early on in researching for this show that I am in way over my head. Like, I'm not going to be able to refute anybody's conspiracy theories on this, although I'm not quite sold on it. What?
You're not quite sold on
I just
what?
ate a bunch of foam.
Oh. Okay, clip that.
It's good foam.
Gobbling foam over here.
That didn't sound right.
Foam gobbler.
I don't know. I'm just not sold on any conspiracy theory. I'm not sure that the CIA did it. I'm not sure that Mossad did it. I think that we might actually have to believe.
You think Oswald did it alone?
I don't know enough about it to really form an opinion, but I'm we have a tendency to jump into conspiracy theories as a movement, and we have to accept that some of the things that we've been told are true, although most of them have been lies. So every once in a while, the conventional narrative will be the truth. And I care about the truth. I do.
Okay.
Maybe sometimes the conventional narrative is the truth. It depends on what we're talking about here.
Unless somebody starts paying us $10,000 an episode, in which case.
Oh yeah, fuck
By
the
the way,
truth.
Cameron-
out the window.
Oh yeah, Russians. The Russians.
Yeah, really.
Hey,
Where are
Cameron,
my rubles? Yeah.
You know a lot of sailors. Do you have experience with foam gobbling? You were in the Navy.
I think I'm going to plead the fifth on that.
Well, you were in the Navy, right?
I was in the Navy, yep, just like JFK.
How much of this did you see?
Oh.
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it at that. What do we want to get
into? This is a proper show. I got new clothes for this show, okay?
This was going to be our Thanksgiving show.
I pulled a shirt out from under my bed and threw it on and showed up here like 5
minutes before, as usual. Right.
As usual.
Thanks. That's great.
What are we talking about first? What do we want to... Oh, the reason why we want to talk about JFK is because...
It's the 61st anniversary of the assassination on November 22nd, 1963. And that's significant. It's been 61 years of occupation.
Even more significant since RFK is now part of the Trump administration. Right.
Yeah. Will we see disclosure? I don't think we will. It's interesting when the last round came out, I think, was it in 2022? There was some really interesting stuff that was declassified.
What can you give me the TLDR of the 2022 JFK revelations?
Yeah, what is it, Dave?
I should be able to pull this up on Twitter real quick, but you know me, boomer tech. I'll see if I can. But basically, it was that the Palestinian Authority had sent a telegram that was intercepted by the NSA, basically blaming immediately a certain state in the Middle East for the assassination.
That place, okay.
Yeah. So let me see if I can pull this up.
Palestine. Iran?
Iran.
Iraq, Syria, who are we talking about here?
Let's see. Yeah, actually, here it is. Can I do this with my browser? Yes, I can.
I have no idea.
This is the actual document here that was declassified. It's kind of wild, right? It says, the assassination of the great President Kennedy was a shock to Palestinians. Please convey our sincere sympathy to the Kennedy family and to the people of the United States. Behind the mysterious crime is a carefully plotted Zionist conspiracy. Review of the secret and overt Zionist criminal conspiracies against Lord Mouin Bernadotte, the Egyptian and German scientists, as well as the terrorist method adopted in kidnapping Eichmann and many others, provides the evidence to question the position of their secret organizations. The late president was likely to win the coming presidency elections without supplicating to the Zionist sympathy or seeking the Jews' votes. Aware of that fact, their influence and power in the United States are based upon their influence and power. Their influence and power in the United States is based upon their votes, and the Zionists murdered the courageous president who was about to destroy that legend of theirs. His assassination is a warning to the rest of the honorable leaders. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but they didn't give us any evidence. This doesn't tell us anything that we didn't know before.
No, and it's interesting that it stayed classified until 2022. Why did this stay classified for almost 60 years, 59 years?
Because they don't want people who are naturally
redacted.
anti-Semitic to become more anti-Semitic.
Naturally anti-Semitic.
Well, it's still...
Aren't we all?
Well, and this is why it should be unredacted, because if we knew who sent this, if we knew at what capacity this was sent, was this an ambassador sending this, or was this like somebody on a ham radio? We don't really know too much about the nature of this communication at all. Was this the Palestinians just kind of throwing anything at the wall to see if it stuck? I
don't know. I don't find this particularly compelling. No, if they had intel, they would have said it.
I'm just saying that it's interesting that this, was not released for 59 years.
Well, there's also a whole bunch of other stuff that hasn't been declassified yet. And what is the reason for that?
Right.
And, a lot of times evidence could just be, sufficient evidence could just be motive.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No,
like
no. Motive is never sufficient
and
evidence.
why do they always search for murderers? Like, why do they always say, okay, let's look for the person who has the motive?
Because juries like to have it. In terms of convicting somebody, you actually don't ever have to provide motive.
Well,
it's pretty pointless circumstantial evidence. Also, a lot of people had motivation to kill JFK.
That's true.
A lot of people did. A lot of people have motivation to kill Trump. A lot of people have motivation to kill, a lot of people. But most of the motive was, I would say, Israel had most of the motive. And they were the ones who invited, the B'nai B'rith were the ones who invited JFK to the event to begin with. And they owned the buildings from where the shots were first fired. And
the Daltex building.
The Daltex building. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence.
We've got some props that you guys should see if you can pick up. Final Judgment copies 1 and 2.
Final Judgment.
By Michael Collins Piper. He actually died right here in Coeur d'Alene in 2015. He was, I think he did, what was it? The American Free Press was his outlet. He wrote several books.
Brutally murdered by Mossad.
Well, actually, his autopsy report was one of the first things that I FOIA requested when I moved to the area, because there was a lot of people arguing that, he was too young to die the way that he did. And, I've subsequently learned, I guess he was gay and he might have had AIDS and diabetes and wasn't really taking care of himself that well. And so
Mossad.
He had boils on his back, which are kind of like a signature of the heart attack gun. But it's also like if you have diabetes and AIDS, that could do it too. So he might have just actually died of a heart attack.
Gay AIDS on boils on your back?
I don't know.
AIDS. Cameron.
Anyway, brilliant researcher. He was the first person to put together.
No one is ever going to remember him for this research. They're just going to remember from his gayabetes boil back because of you.
Thanks.
Nice job. Nice obit, buddy.
And another book by Laurent Goineau called The Hidden Kennedy Truth, or The Unspoken Kennedy Truth. And you haven't read them.
No.
Right, you haven't read either of these.
No.
Well.
So I'll read these, and then I'll read the Bugliosi 1,500-page refutation of these, and then I'll be more informed, and then we can talk about this in 3 years.
I don't think anybody refuted Michael Collins Piper's book.
Oh, no, I just
ignored him.
They just
What does
ignored him.
Cameron think? What do you think about JFK?
You're the genius, Cameron. What do you think?
What does our resident genius think?
Sure.
The genius, eh? Yeah. Well, I would say I think there's a couple things. One is that Americans tend to, understandably so, view our history in a vacuum, right? So whatever happened to Kennedy is peculiar to U.S. institutions. But if you look carefully at the history of communism, and obviously communism has a close affiliation with Bolshevism, we know that in part because Churchill wrote about it. If you haven't read that article, you should. It's called Communism. I think it's called Bolshevism and Zionism: The Struggle for the Soul of the Jewish People.
Yes.
It was an op-ed that he penned.
Yes.
But the Bolsheviks, in particular, the communists, had a long history of assassinations, particularly against the czars in Russia. Now, some people know this, some people do not, but intelligence agencies, as we think of them today, actually have their roots in the Okhrana. And the Okhrana was set up basically as secret police to protect the czar against Jewish communist plots to kill him. And they did. They killed a number of people, including Stolypin and others. It's a long history. So this is not something that would break character from them. The Okhrana, by the way, eventually became the Cheka, which was taken over by the communists after the communist revolution. And what did they do? They murdered the Romanov family, right? The Cheka then becomes the NKVD. The NKVD becomes the KGB, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So these kinds of plots have a long history of occurring. I do think, however, that Rebecca is correct. In order for something like that to happen against Kennedy in particular, you would have to have a confluence of different powers that want him removed. In Kennedy's case, it seems like the CIA wanted him gone, LBJ wanted him gone, the Israelis wanted him gone, potentially the bankers wanted him gone. All that being said, what set of institutions or what group in particular would have the means to pull something like that off? The Israelis definitely did. They had the intelligence assets, they had the relationships, they had the political connection, and as Vince said, they had the motivation. So is it not the case that maybe they were the spearhead of multiple influences that wanted him gone? I think that may be the case.
That's involving a lot of people, though. Don't you think that at some point we would have found out the truth that many people were involved?
Well,
9/11 took
maybe
more people.
Maybe not. I mean, to some degree we do, right? Because we're having this discussion. Documents have been leaked. People have discussed it. What you're talking about is a kind of full disclosure. Well, again, if you have powerful lobbying groups behind you, if you have carefully placed individuals that are running agencies and departments that threaten your livelihood and maybe potentially worse, no, I don't think it's all that difficult to imagine that this lie would perpetuate itself long into the future. That being said, I will say I do think we're going to get disclosure. I think it's coming, and I think it's coming because I think the U.S. government is sort of structurally broken. It's fiscally in trouble. There's no real trust or confidence anymore, and there are still good people that are at these agencies that I think will see potential openings to disclose documents. So I think it's coming on a whole range of fronts. Remember, the Kennedy assassination is just one of many conspiracies. But no, I don't think it's that hard to believe, Rebecca. I think it's sad to say this, but most people are going to stay in line if their ass is on the line, and that explains a lot of this behavior.
Well, why did they choose Oswald? That's another question I had. He wasn't a particularly good marksman. I've read different reports about this, but he seemed like he was not incredibly reliable. And then he did have this weird history of emotional instability, which before, I'd seen all of these people be picked up by the FBI and put towards their purpose, I would have thought was more strange. But he had defected to the Soviet Union, and then when they were like, no, he tried to kill himself. And
well, we don't know if he defected to the Soviet Union. I mean, again, that's like a whole, like, was he sheep dipped or something like that, where he was sent over to Russia on a intelligence mission where he met a woman, brought her back. You see what I mean? Because there's a lot of evidence pointing towards the fact that he was a CIA operative. I believe Oswald was involved with naval intelligence before. He was, from what I understand, deployed to Russia. And he might have even leaked the information on, I believe it was the B-52 stealth or one of the spy planes, because while he was over there, there was a big hostage
U-2,
crisis with the U-2. And people think that it was actually Oswald that gave some of that information to the Soviets as a limited way of cooperating with them through that, right?
And let's be clear, though. We're talking about how Israel had the motivation. We got to explain why they had the motivation. So JFK was basically the only one standing in the way of them getting the bomb, right? He constantly ordered, he asked for investigations into their Dimona plant over and over and over again. They denied them over and over and over again. And then eventually they agreed after he threatened them. And then when he sent investigators there to check out the plant, they literally set up a fake control room and a fake control panel to sort of like trick the investigators. And then they said they can't go anywhere near the nuclear plant. So Kennedy dies. Israel gets the bomb basically immediately after that. And they stole 600 pounds of highly enriched uranium from the U.S. through a company that was owned by an American Jew, right? Last name Shapiro, by the way. It was the NUMEC, right, conspiracy. Right. And it was a company in Pennsylvania, I think, right?
Yeah, I believe. Wasn't it Apollo, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, it was called the Apollo Affair. So for those who aren't familiar, look up the Apollo Affair, check that out. And then they got the bomb. And, you know, they invited, it was B'nai B'rith, now known as the ADL, that invited JFK to this event in Dallas, Texas, and they owned the buildings from which the first shots were fired. And then they tried to, you know, blame it on the CIA. Now, I'm sure the CIA played a part. I'm sure the Italian mafia played a part. Certainly the Mossad played a part. And also certainly the Jewish mafia played a part. You look into, you know, people like Meyer Lansky, the Kosher Nostra. I think Dave's pulling it up on screen right now.
Yeah, I'm just kind of going over some random.
Plant. In fact, everyone knows this except for America. Like, if you want to play the Gaddafi clip, can you pull that up?
Yeah, I should be able to.
There's Meyer Lansky right there, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
And who killed Mosley? Who killed Oswald Mosley?
Oswald Mosley?
Or not Oswald Mosley. Oh my gosh, Lee Harvey Oswald. Who killed Lee Harvey Oswald?
Jakob Rubinstein.
Right.
Jack Ruby, right?
And who ordered his removal from that who ordered the transfer? The transfer
of Oswald to the different jail, right? I don't. My brain.
I think it's in this clip.
Well, let's see.
Let's play it.
Let's see.
وأصر على تفتيش ليتأكد من أنه يصنع أسلحة ذرية وإلا لا. ورفض الإسرائيليون، وأخيرا أصر هو على التفتيش. كان المخرج من هذه الأزمة هو استقالة بن غوريون. استقال حتى لا يوافق على تفتيش مفاعل ديمونة، وأعطى الضوء الأخضر بقتل كندي. وهكذا قتل كندي بسبب مفاعل ديمونة وإصراره على تفتيشه. بسبب إصراره على تفتيشه قتل كندي.
On September 23, 2009, Gaddafi had the guts to demand a new investigation in front of the General Assembly of the United Nations.
قضية تطرح في الجمعية العامة لابد أن يطلق.
Wasn't too long after this that he went away
permanently. And
you know, there's some other things that play a part in that as well. There was the email from WikiLeaks from Sidney Blumenthal to Hillary Clinton. You guys know about this email where they basically said that he had 124 tons of gold and he was getting ready to set up a pan-African currency.
Oh, Gaddafi, right?
Yeah, this is from Sidney Blumenthal to Hillary
JFK,
Clinton.
really?
Yeah. And then he died shortly after that as well.
But why would they kill Oswald in such a way? Like, that seems very inefficient. If somebody is your patsy and they do this thing, then you pick him up after he kills JFK and then you immediately murder him, right? Like why even bother?
Yo, I didn't know that was going to sound. I don't know this. I didn't know the sound was going to pop up.
There we go.
I'm just asking questions, guys. This is where I get hung up on this.
By the way, Power Chat is up and running. PowerChat.live/thebacklash. Patsies get killed all the time. People that are about to leak information get killed all the time. Look what happened to Epstein.
Now, have you guys heard about what happened to Jack Ruby after he got arrested?
What happened?
Have you? Okay, give me 1 second. Let me find this YouTube clip because it's just he went insane. Apparently, the head of the MK Ultra department came and visited him in jail and potentially administered like a very high dose of LSD. And Ruby lost his mind and started ranting. And let me see.
This was around that time, wasn't it? Around that time when that first started kicking off. It's hard to find stuff on YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah, anymore. It was the
videos.
infographic show.
But not this show. You go to Blonde in the Belly of the Beast, and it's right there under the
Yeah,
back.
here, hold on a minute. I think this is actually
November
it.
22nd, 1963. A warm, sunny day in Dallas, Texas. Multiple shots ring out. Moments later, the President of the United States is dead. 2 days later, the man responsible was also dead. The man who killed him, Jack Ruby, descended into an unfathomable mental illness and himself died not too long after. And as you'll see today, many other people connected in some way with the JFK assassination quickly bit the dust. Number 6. So what really happened to Jack Ruby? So what happened to Jack Ruby? How come he lost his mind after he killed Oswald? One man who'd done a lot of research on this topic and a lot of research into the Manson murders isn't quite sure, but does say some things look out of the ordinary. His name is Tom O'Neill, and he just had a book come out after researching the Manson murders for over 20 years. In a podcast, he said this about Ruby's meeting with Louis Jolyon Jolly West, a man that for a long time denied he was working with the CIA on mind control program MK Ultra. O'Neill said, "My most important finding is that a CIA contracted agent or researcher for mind control became that witness's doctor right before he testified and told his story, and then he goes crazy. The problem is no one who worked in MK Ultra will talk about it. It would have remained a complete secret had the CIA got away with destroying all related files." We know that just before Ruby was to testify to the Warren Commission, West visited him in his jail cell. No other people were present. West said Ruby had gone mad and was a paranoid, rambling mess of a man. We must remember here that prior to this, when West wrote to the CIA's mind control master, Sidney Gottlieb, he said his specialty was inducing insanity in people without their awareness. We know that after Ruby shot Oswald, some strange things happened. The police pinned him to the floor, and out of his mouth came these words, "What am I doing here? What are you guys jumping on me for?" It was as if he wasn't in control of himself. A psychiatrist later said that Ruby had suffered from a fugue state with subsequent amnesia. A fugue state is characterized by someone who suddenly loses their sense of themselves, having a kind of breakdown where they don't know what they're doing. Remember, no one had any idea that West had been working with the CIA on mind control. West tried very hard to get involved with Ruby, at one time asking Judge Joe B. Brown to appoint him on the case. According to documents that were found by Tom O'Neill a long time after the trial, West had been asked by someone to work on the case, but he never said who. At first, the judge refused to give West access to Ruby, but with some effort, West insinuated himself in the case. It was thought that perhaps West, with all the skills he had, could help Ruby recall the day he shot Oswald. On April 26, 1964, West boarded a plane and went to see Ruby. Not long after, West came out of Ruby's cell and stated the man had a complete psychotic break. West said that Ruby was positively insane. No one knows and will likely never know what happened in that cell. In a sworn affidavit, West wrote that Ruby was hearing things and seeing things, going as far as to hide under his table because he thought
increasing our own capabilities and better our quality of life rather than try converting or creating new political parties. It will be better for everyone.
So
True.
Ruby went crazy.
Yeah, anyway, well, hold on.
all the Jews in the US would be slaughtered. West said that Ruby said he'd seen his brother tortured, horribly mutilated, castrated, and burned in the street outside the jail. West wrote that Ruby could still hear the screams of Jewish children being boiled alive. It sounded like a really bad trip. After that, any other doctor that met with Ruby came to the same conclusion. He had suddenly gone mad. Still, doctors who talked with Ruby before West had seen him had said he was absolutely fine, not crazy at all. West wrote, "Tonight, my own findings make it clear that there has been an acute change in the patient's condition since these earlier studies were carried out." A doctor that had seen Ruby before and after he had met with West was astounded by the change. His name was Dr. William Beavers, and he wrote that there was a possibility that someone had done something to Ruby, perhaps given him some sort of very powerful drug. He wrote the possibility of toxic psychosis could be entertained, but is considered unlikely because of the protected situation. Obviously, Beavers could not have had an inkling that West was involved in a project that forced powerful drugs on unwitting victims and tried to mess with their minds. A good point is, what if he had known about West's involvement with the CIA's dark program? He probably would have looked into the matter further. What's even stranger is the fact that Ruby was visited by Dr. Werner Tudor in 1965. He made an evaluation and sent the notes to West so they could be submitted to court. West looked at the documents and he erased one part. It said, "There is considerable guilt about the fact he sent guns to Cuba." Why did West expunge that line? Did he have anything to do with Ruby's breakdown? We don't know. There is a possibility that there is more to the story than we already know. After all, the CIA wasn't exactly forthcoming about its mind control efforts. Now, listen to how three men...
That's kind of the story of Jack Ruby.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. He lost his mind and thought that there was like a second Holocaust happening in America while he was in jail and was screaming about it until the day he died. I think he died of like a very rapid onset cancer that's been linked to drugs that have been created by the CIA to kill people, make it look like they died naturally.
So the guy that supposedly shot JFK gets killed by Jack Rubenstein.
Yeah, there you go.
Then Jack Rubenstein goes
Phil
crazy.
Sent $50. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours.
Dies.
Glad to see the new show finding its footing.
We're trying.
Happy Thanksgiving. Cam, what are your thoughts on all of this information?
Look, I think it's a mistake to assume that it was one variable. I think Rebecca's assessment is correct. I think there were multiple centers of power that wanted Kennedy gone.
Mm-hmm.
They may have cooperated on some level, maybe they didn't, but that to some degree might explain how clunky it turned out to be as well, right? Because if you have multiple conspiracies operating at the same time, you could conceivably get dysfunction, and that's probably what happened. But again, look at the fallout, right? We got the Vietnam War. Kennedy almost certainly did not want that to happen. The Vietnam War was something that destroyed LBJ, but the CIA wanted it, just as the CIA wants war with Russia today. See, the continuity is there. And obviously Israel got nuclear weapons. So it seems you had a convergence of interests that wanted him gone. Now, one other thing I should note, too, is that Kennedy wanted to remove the private banking cartel that is the Fed, or at least he wanted to audit it in a way that had not been done before. He wanted to put various powers of the Fed underneath the Treasury Department. So again, what do you have here? You have a means of financing, right? You have an intelligence apparatus, both onshore and offshore, and you have very specific interests at stake. So it suggests to me that it was a multitude of forces that wanted him gone, and a somewhat clunky, incoherent conspiracy that produced it.
Yeah, and you could look at the CIA director at the time.
Well, the counterintelligence director, Jim Angleton. Do you know anything about him, Cameron?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, he's a really interesting fellow from Boise, Idaho. I visited his grave a couple of months ago. From Boise, very involved with the seedier side, from what I understand, of the CIA, the kind of like sex parties and stuff that was going on with J. Edgar Hoover and Louis Rosenstiel and Meyer Lansky at the Plaza Hotel, right? He was a part of that crowd. And he was also one of the founding fathers of the CIA. He was the first head of CIA counterintelligence, and also was the head of the Israel desk. So he managed relations with Mossad, Shin Bet, and the other security services of Israel while he was in the CIA. And it's interesting. He's got a memorial, as does Frank Sinatra in Israel as a founding father.
Really?
Yeah. Frank Sinatra smuggled some guns and money for the Friends of the Freedom Fighters.
Nice.
So,
look, the only thing I would add is, Kennedy was an extremely flawed man, right? He had an untoward background. The Kennedys almost certainly stole the election from Nixon in 1961.
Yeah.
We know that. He had a massive drug problem because he had venereal disease.
Yes. Yeah.
He had a massive female problem. And when he met Khrushchev in 1961, he made an ass of himself. And there were a lot of people in the U.S. government that did not think that he was competent. Okay. So again, I think this answers your question, Rebecca. It's like, how do you pull a conspiracy of this magnitude off? Well, because there's a consensus that this man is unfit to be president and he needs to be removed. And I don't think I'm not saying that the whole government concluded that. I'm saying enough powerful actors probably did. And remember, he had the mob connections as well. He was fooling around with one of the big mobsters' girlfriends. So he was vulnerable as president during the height of the Cold War. So I'm just not all that surprised that untoward forces arose against him and potentially neutralized the guy.
Well, that doesn't surprise me either, but would the consensus persevere? Like at this point in time, wouldn't we have more solid evidence? There have been these small leaks that have happened in the interim, but we've never found definitive proof.
Well, I mean,
I would expect it at this point, is all I'm saying.
I don't know if we're ever going to get definitive proof on it, but I mean, again, I think it's a matter of you got to look at all of the factors, all of the pieces of evidence, you know, in its totality, and then kind of, you know, begin using your brain and drawing some assumptions.
Well, the people with the, I mean, I would say the actor with the biggest motive is Israel, but I agree that you had the CIA, you had the mob connection, you had the Italian mob, you had Kosher Nostra, you had all these different players that were involved in this. But
here, you want me to,
who gained the most? You know, it was Israel who gained the most by getting the bomb, and like immediately after. And then they tried to pin the entire blame. They tried to feed this narrative into the public's mind that it was just the CIA.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what this part is about.
Here, let's we'll take a look at this clip.
The mainstream media and publishing houses again played a major role in steering conspiracy theorists toward the CIA trail, while avoiding any hint of Israeli involvement. One major contributor to that effort was the Israeli-American Alan Weberman, a close associate to Jewish Defense Organization, with his 1975 book, Coup d'etat in America, The CIA and the Assassination of John F. Kennedy, co-authored by Michael Canfield. Weberman acknowledged Richard Pearl's assistance in his investigation. This book contributed to the momentum that led the House Select Committee on Assassinations to reinvestigate in 1976 the murders of JFK and Dr. Martin Luther King, with a special focus on the CIA and organized crime. It is also in this context that Newsweek journalist Edward J. Epstein published an interview of George de Mohrenschildt, a Russian geologist and consultant for Texan oilmen who had befriended Oswald and his Russian wife in Dallas in 1962. De Mohrenschildt admitted that Oswald was introduced to him at the instigation of a CIA agent. The problem is that de Mohrenschildt was in no position to confirm or deny the words that Epstein ascribed to him. He was found dead a few hours after giving the interview. De Mohrenschildt's death was ruled a suicide. The sheriff's report mentions that in his last month he complained that, quote, the Jews and the Jewish mafia were out to get him. Needless to say, Epstein didn't mention anything about this. We should also mention author Mark Levin by his real name. He was the first to incriminate the FBI and the CIA
was right.
directly in his articles and then in a 1966 book, Rush to Judgment, which received considerable media coverage. Lane was adamant that the CIA was a culprit in his last book, published in 2011, Last Word, My Indictment of the CIA in the Murder of JFK. That Israeli agents had been instrumental in spreading conspiracy theories targeting the CIA has become evident with Oliver Stone's film JFK, released in 1991, starring Kevin Costner in the role of District Attorney Jim Garrison. This film, which shook public opinion to the point of motivating the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, was produced by Arnon Milchan, described in a 2011 biography as being from his youth, quote, one of the most important covert agents that Israeli intelligence has ever fielded. Milchan was working in particular to boost Israel's nuclear program. In 2013, Milchan publicly revealed his extended activity as a secret agent of Israel. It is therefore no wonder that Stone's film gives no hint of the Mossad connection that Garrison had stumbled upon. All these examples demonstrate that the charges against the CIA have been the subject of considerable investment by authors who are predominantly Jewish and benefited from an effective echo chamber in the mainstream press. The mainstream news and entertainment industry engaged in double-dealing. While ostensibly defending the official theory of the lone gunner on the front page, they channeled the skeptic's scrutiny towards the CIA. This is a typical strategy of Israel, occupying the ground of protest and creating a rigged debate excluding any reference to Israel. The contradiction of the official thesis is maintained focused on the CIA, the military-industrial complex, or any other 100% American organization by an elite of militants whose primary motivation is the preservation of the interest of the Jewish community.
Pretty interesting stuff. And, you know, if they can take control of entire governments, like, I mean, just listen, like, if the Jewish population in America is smaller than the Mormon population. I'm pretty sure I'm correct about that. I mean, it's a very small and 70% of them vote Democrat. Now, why do Republicans constantly pander to them? Right? Why do both parties pander to them? Why do we have world politicians, not just American politicians, but politicians of the world all go to the Western Wall and pray under the Western Wall and pander to Jewish people? There's a reason for that. It's because they have control of government. So if they can do that, they can certainly pull off an assassination of one person.
I'm not saying it's impossible, that it's impossible.
And I'm not saying it's just them. There are other players involved.
Right. I mean, if you have aligned motives, okay, if you and your best friend both hate your wife, you still don't ask your best friend to help you kill your wife because it's a liability. You just kill your wife because there's a bigger chance that you get caught.
Don't do that.
Well, I would never kill your wife because she made me this lovely cup of tea. That's the only reason, though.
So,
I'm just saying.
So I do think that I would build upon your point, Vince, because it's worse than that, right? It's not just that you have foreign interests that have subverted and potentially co-opted the U.S. government to their means. I think ultimately the precedent of the Kennedy assassination, because remember, there's two parts. There's the assassination itself, which is the subject that we're addressing. But there's also the failure of the subsequent investigation. There's a failure to address what happened and to impose any discipline on the government for it, right? What does that mean? It means that from Kennedy forward, and I think Kennedy's an interesting line to demarcate because the president before him, Dwight Eisenhower, was a 4-star general, right? This is a man who had tremendous power and influence. And what does Eisenhower do as soon as he leaves office? He warns of the military-industrial complex, okay? So in addition to the military-industrial complex and the emergence of the CIA and the FBI, you also then have the emergence of Israel as a major power in the Middle East and obviously influence in the United States. From Kennedy to today, no president really has controlled what I call the triad, which is basically the U.S. government. And the triad is 3 components. It's the executive branch, the 15 some odd departments that report directly to the president. It's the intelligence apparatus, which is the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA, right, and their respective departments. And it's the military-industrial complex, which is not just DOD. It's the think tanks, the nonprofits, the contractors, et cetera, right? So the precedent is that no president since Kennedy in the 60s has really marshaled control of the U.S. government. Now, that should tell you where we stand today and the significance of the election that we just voted for. One other note on this. I think Nixon was the only president who really had the means and actually tried to get control of government when he comes in 68 and then wins in a historic landslide in 72. There's a lot of evidence that Nixon wanted to reorg, if not shut down the CIA. He had actually set up his own intelligence apparatus in the White House because he didn't trust the CIA. Well, what happened to Nixon? Watergate. He was impeached and removed. And there's a very good article that I recommend the audience looks at, which is called How the Deep State Took Down Nixon, Nathan Pinkowski, which again picks up on this theme that basically Kennedy went down and so did the legitimacy of the U.S. government. No president since has marshaled control of the U.S. government, whether they were elected or otherwise. That is the situation that we face.
And I think that article, or maybe it's not that article that talks about it, but the Nixon tapes, right? And what he said about people controlling our government, certain groups of people controlling our government and saying how we have to get them out. So
that's right.
It's not a conspiracy.
That's right.
It's fact.
Wignats.
You're all Wignats.
Oh, someone asked if it's a green screen again.
I know.
It is not a green
It's not
screen.
Do I have to go back and jump on the couch?
No, just check our Twitter.
Should I jump on the couch?
No, Vince went into the background last week, so to prove to everybody this is not a green screen, which it is not.
I'm gonna go do a flip on the couch right now.
Bruh.
He's doing it.
I don't have insurance for that. I don't have insurance for that.
This
Great.
guy.
Great.
Totally off leash.
So 61 years. Oh, there was one other article that I wanted to see if I could pull up real quick. Life site.
It's just a deep green screen.
Someone's saying I should slide down the handrail.
Anonymous sent $10. Doesn't the BS Biden's doing prove why we shouldn't have a system where boomers can be elected?
Is anybody going to answer that seriously? Well, what the BS that Biden is doing prove that we shouldn't have a system where boomers are elected. I mean, there's a strong argument to be made about a maximum age that you can be in government.
Mm.
And I think that
I don't think you should be allowed in government if you don't have kids.
Yeah, there are a lot of arguments to be made here, but I think 70 is probably old enough.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is too old. Biden is way too old. How many years apart are they? Just a few, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 years.
2 years?
Trump, they're both
That's crazy.
Same age, yeah.
Biden seems like he's 90.
Yeah.
But now, before we move on from the Kennedy stuff, I wanted to pull up this article real quick, which I thought was interesting. This came out from LifeSite News, which is a very mainstream Catholic publication here. I think they're based out of Canada, but they wrote a really interesting article that I think you should watch and read. There's links to Laurent Guinot's documentary in here. The article is called How the Kennedy Assassinations Ushered in a Zionist Occupation of America.
That's interesting.
And I think it's very interesting for a site as mainstream as LifeSite News to be writing articles like this in this day and age is significant.
Well, think
and
about all the
needs to be
crazy
acknowledged.
stuff that happened in the 1960s. Like you had the 1965 Hart-Celler Act.
We got rid of the silver in our coins in 1964. Vatican II happened in 1965.
Yeah, Vatican II.
I mean, the way that I
Kennedy
look at it,
assassination.
it was there was a struggle between the WASPs and the Catholics in America, right? And at one point, the Catholics got the upper hand, and that was with the election of JFK. And at that moment, the WASPs teamed up with the Jewish elements, I think, to take out the Catholics. In an organized way.
$14.88 hail Blondo /
Oh, geez.
We got to take those off screen. We got to read them after the show. Wait, that was Mike Lindell, I think.
I think that was Mike Lindell.
That was Mike Lindell.
Use promo code RealBacklash.
No, but a lot of stuff happened.
No, not yet. Not yet. Don't do that.
My pillow, yeah. You had the Kennedy assassination. You had Vatican II. You had the sexual revolution. You had the Vietnam War. You had the assassination of JFK.
Beatlemania.
You had all. I mean, what else happened? I think you had
the psychedelic revolution, the sexual revolution. We got off the golds. Well, I mean, we got off the silver standard.
The first contraception went mainstream.
Right. Yes, I thought that was in the late 50s.
Well, but
I think it got like really mainstreamed in the 60s.
Yeah, and I think Humanae Vitae wasn't until the 70s.
When was Reagan governor?
80.
No. He was president.
70s, right?
70s. He was governor.
That's when abortion started.
Yeah, so he was like a big promoter of abortion.
He allowed it,
right?
Yeah,
and amnesty and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. But it marked a paradigm shift. I think that
the broader arc. Certainly the 60s was a fulcrum point that I don't quibble with anything you say. However, I do think the seeds were there long before. So there's another book I'll recommend. It's called The Iron Curtain Over America. It was written by John Beatty. And it talks at length about people like Harry Dexter White, who's a communist agent, and the communist presence in FDR's government. So the seeds have been sown for a long time. I think the prevailing theme is, and this is certainly my opinion, and there are a lot of people who disagree with it, but I think the reality is that the U.S. government, its institutions, its culture, for most of our history, has been an open book. It's a porous membrane. And so these people weren't really meaningfully opposed at all, right? There was no real WASP elite that was protecting the United States. They just weren't there. And so these people sort of just absorbed the agencies of power. Nobody really tried to stop them. And by the time, anybody sort of asked questions about it, they ran the State Department, they were running the intelligence agencies, and we found ourselves basically presiding over a warfare state and leaving the gold standard. So certainly the 60s was a critical turning point. But I strongly disagree, and I know that there are a lot of people who oppose what I'm saying. But there's sort of this Carol Quigley argument. People like Jay Dyer make this, that there was an Atlanticist intelligence apparatus, intelligentsia elite. I don't think there was. I just don't think we were paying any attention. And after World War II, that was the opportunity that these people used to sort of subvert the government, and they've been in power ever since. That's sort of the way I look at it.
Yeah, some people were saying in the chat, you had MK Ultra, you had, what else did they mention? MK Ultra, you had there was a bunch. Yeah,
what about there was the whole...
Martin Luther King.
Oh, yeah.
So they mentioned Martin Luther King in the reinvestigation of the assassination of JFK and the reinvestigation of the assassination of MLK. You look into MLK's ties. He had ties with the Rothschilds. He did big events with the Rothschilds.
And the ADL.
Right? He marched down the street with the ADL.
That's right.
And then his main speechwriter, his name was Stanley Levison.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one
Stanley
who wrote
Levison,
he was the one who wrote the I Had a Dream speech. And then look who founded the NAACP during that time as well. It was
wasn't
Henry
black
Moskowitz.
Guys.
Yeah, it
wasn't black guys.
Yeah. So anyway.
Oh my gosh.
But one more thing I did want to mention about JFK before we move on. I mean, I think that we attribute a lot of things to conspiracy, especially in the investigation, that could be attributed just to incompetence. There was a lot of incompetence, especially in the autopsy. They didn't even weigh his brain matter.
Was that willful incompetence? Because people say that the body was even switched out. People say that the autopsies were faked. People say that the head wound, if you look at the Zapruder film, is in a different place than where it was.
Look at the autopsy of George Floyd.
Yeah, I know. I know. But I'm saying as a group, we tend to project intelligence on people that may just be incompetent. And then we create these systems. I'm not saying that we're necessarily doing that here, but we do have a tendency to do it.
It's one hell of a coincidence.
Yes. but they do happen. Things that are highly coincidental do happen. That's why there's a name for it, a coincidence.
Salty cracker.
Salty cracker sent $10 all day.
Oy vey.
Really? Seriously? Do we want to
move on?
Not the
kind of show that I want.
I know.
Do we want to move on to the first Thanksgiving before we end?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Who did the show prep for that?
No idea.
You, I hope. Did you drop this link in there?
Let's talk about
what
the
link?
first. Oh, one thing, Dave, I did want to talk about last time around was, speaking of the Pilgrims, speaking of the first Americans, I do want to talk because I think we played that clip with Milo and he was like arguing with someone on Tim Pool, some like Jewish guy on Timcast, Eliad, I forget his name, about how America was always supposed to be a Christian nation. I do want to see if you can pull this up on Google Earth. There's this thing called the America's Monument to the Forefathers. And it's something I've talked about before. Let's see if you can find it here. It's called America's Monument to the Forefathers.
Let's see.
I don't know. It doesn't have to be Google Earth, but if you just pull this up, I just want to show people this real quick.
Is this the cool one that's like abandoned?
No, it's the biggest granite statue in America. Actually, it could be the biggest granite statue in the world, if I'm not mistaken. And if you look at this is built in the 1800s. And in the center of the statue, this is sitting in right by Plymouth, Massachusetts, or in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Not many people actually know about this. The center statue the name of the statue in the center is Faith. And Faith is actually holding the Bible in her hands. Underneath that main statue, you've got 4 other statues. One of them is called Morality. The name is, you can see her right there, Morality. And she's holding the 10 Commandments. So basically what this monument is saying is that the foundation has to be God. It has to be Jesus Christ. It has to be God. And then our morality must be based on that foundation. And our laws must be written in such a way that it takes into consideration the Christian understanding of morality. So the point of this monument is that our country was supposed to be a Christian country, and our laws, our morality should be derived from a Christian understanding of morality, and our laws should be written based on that. That's basically what the statue is saying.
$10. What exactly are the differences between the Scofield Bible and the normal field Bible?
The normal field Bible.
What's the normal field Bible? Just like a normal Bible. So in the late 1800s, a man named Samuel Untermeyer, a Jewish financier, contracted a guy by the name of Cyrus Scofield to create a new Bible. And in that Bible, there were 2 footnotes that were changed. One of them was for like Genesis 3:12, I think. And then there was one other footnote. And basically, this is going back to there will be enmity between you and the woman and her seed and your seed, and, she will crush your head and you will strike her heel. That whole prophecy thing that happened in Genesis 3:12, and applies it to Israel, the modern state of Israel.
Right.
And that's a novel interpretation of those texts that for, 1,700 years, it had always been understood that the Catholic Church is Israel, that the Catholic Church is the group of people who chose God, right? It's not just that they're chosen, they also chose God.
So they got the Protestants and they got the Catholics with Vatican II.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, in the 60s, someone mentioned in the live chat too, it was the banning of God from public schools that happened with the Supreme Court cases. So
True.
Anyway, so first Thanksgiving, I don't know if you guys want to talk
Here we
about
go.
the Pilgrims. I don't know what you have, but you want to play this clip? It's pretty funny.
Sure.
It's a famous clip.
Here we go. Oh, my goodness.
Just
Sitting
response
Bull
to
requested this council. We await his words.
Take your soldiers out of here. They scare the game away.
Very well, sir. Tell me then, how far away should I take my men?
You must take them out of our lands.
What precisely are your lands?
These are the lands where my people lived before you whites first came.
I don't understand. We whites were not your first enemies. Why don't you demand back the land in Minnesota where the Chippewa and others forced you from years before?
The Black Hills are sacred land given to my people by Wakantonka.
Not very convenient to cloak your claims in spiritualism. And what would you say to the Mormons and others who believe that their God has given to them Indian lands in the West?
I would say they should listen to Wakantonka.
No matter what your legends say, you didn't sprout from the plains like the spring grasses, and you didn't coalesce out of the ether. You came out of the Minnesota woodlands, armed to the teeth, and set upon your fellow man. You massacred the Kiowa, the Omaha, the Ponca, the Oto, and the Pawnee without mercy. And yet you claim the Black Hills as a private preserve bequeathed to you by the Great Spirit.
And who gave us the guns and powder to kill our enemies? And who traded weapons to the Chippewa and others who drove us from our home?
Chief Sitting Bull, the proposition that you were a peaceable people before the appearance of the white man is the most fanciful legend of all. You were killing each other for hundreds of moons before the first white stepped foot on this continent. You conquered those tribes, lusting for their game and their lands, just as we have now conquered you for no less noble a cause.
This is your story of my people.
This is the truth, not legend.
Pretty good clip, huh?
Great clip.
I mean,
not exactly the first Thanksgiving.
No, I know, but I'm just the status quo, right? The main narrative, the mainstream narrative right now is that like whites, killed all these brown people and took this country and blah 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 blah. When in reality, I mean, if you really want to look into it, you can look into the You can look into the passageway. What is it called up there by Alaska? What was it called?
The
No, it was called the
bridge, right?
Yeah,
the
land bridge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can dive into all of this, but that was the point of the clip. It's just like, you go to a local college campus, and this is the story that they're telling kids, right?
Right.
So, like, even here in Idaho schools, I think.
Well, yeah, especially in Idaho, they've got the story all wrong with the Idaho Indians, because there wasn't any fighting with the Coeur d'Alenes, from what I understand. Right. The Coeur d'Alenes actually, I think it was in like 1620, Chief Circling Raven had a vision that a man wearing black robes with crossed sticks around his neck would come and teach them about the Great Spirit, and that they should hang out. And he lived to 150 years old, and eventually Father De Smet came, and the Indians came and begged for baptism, and the entire tribe converted to Catholicism in one day. And so that's interesting.
Ben Shapiro.
Oh boy, we've been found out.
It's actually not talking anymore.
I think you can check a box when you pay the money.
Cam, what do you think about this narrative of like white people killed a bunch of brown people, and that's the only reason why these countries are successful?
Yeah, it's a good clip. So not a lot is known conventionally by Americans, and a lot of it is because of the revisionism that you guys are talking about pre-Columbian indigenous culture. But it was brutal. And there's actually, I've done some research on this of late, in part because I am in Mexico. But a lot of the cartel activity, a lot of the mass killings, and the nature, the sort of ritualistic killings that a lot of these groups do, a lot of that has its roots in pre-Columbian America. So when Europeans got to Mesoamerica, when we got to North America, and over the last, I would say, 10 or 20 years, maybe even longer, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence. And
sorry, Cam.
There's a lot of forensic evidence of mass grave sites of cannibalism, because the indigenous population engaged in cannibalism and ritual sacrifice on an industrial scale. This is what the Spaniards described when they got here. Now, the mainstream has sort of dismissed all this as revisionism from the Spaniards and others to justify what they did, but actually speaking, what they found were people that were extremely violent, that were engaged in perpetual genocidal warfare against one another. Now, one other note on this that's very important to look up that a lot of people don't know about, it's called King Philip's War. King Philip's War was fought in the late 18th century. 17th century, 1675 to 1676. And this was basically a war between the New England homesteaders and the indigenous Iroquois and other groups that were in New England that had literally burned down, raped, murdered, and eviscerated a lot of the New Englanders that were up there. And so this is, according to Sam Huntington and various other historians, the first war of American identity was fought to ultimately conquer and put down these Stone Age peoples who were extremely violent and dangerous. So that was the beginning of our country's history, and there were reasons why the Europeans did what they did. That's simply a fact, a historical reality that we have to deal with.
Right. And I think that because we all were raised in government schools, that people don't even understand the nature of imperialism. What do these people want that are denying the nature of how our country began? They don't want people that are stronger, more technologically advanced to populate vast, uncivilized areas. Something similar happened in South Africa. There was nobody in South Africa at the time. It was Bantus from the north, but they're going to continue to act like these people conquered all of these other people. The Indians were warring tribes doing savage, horrible things to one another.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they also practiced slavery too. That's
Nobody
something
wants
that
to
is
talk
often,
about that.
Yeah, that's often overlooked. I mean, they enslaved white people that they captured. They enslaved each other. So no, you're exactly right. The South Africa example is a good one too, because in a similar sense, the indigenous tribes that were there, they were nomadic. They didn't actually set up any encampments or agricultural infrastructure. None of that was there. That was all established by the Afrikaners.
Yep, exactly.
There's a famous quote from Thomas Sowell. Let me see if I can find it about slavery. By the way, there's still slavery happening right now in Libya. There's still slavery happening.
Open air
yeah.
slave markets, yeah.
Right.
As far as I'm concerned, there's still slavery in America. Everybody that's got a student loan, a student college debt or whatever.
That's
true.
exactly the same
in many ways,
as
right?
being enslaved.
Corporations, slave to the corporation.
Absolutely.
He says, quote, more whites were brought as slaves to North Africa than blacks brought as slaves to the United States or to the 13 colonies from which it was formed. White slaves were still being bought and sold in the Ottoman Empire decades after blacks were freed in the United States. That's
in the 17th century, there were more Irish slaves in North America than there were Africans because they were cheaper. And the King of England had issued a proclamation that they could be widely distributed as slaves. Yeah, no, I mean, again, these are facts that are often left out of the discussion, but we know why. We know what the agenda is. But it is important to document and understand that the nature of the folks that were here when we arrived. I mean, there were reasons why Europeans engaged in what they did, and a lot of it was because they were absolutely horrified by the industrial scale, cannibalism, as well as the sort of ritualistic murder. I mean, down in South America, it was even worse. The Aztecs were using, I think, Abyssinian blades, and they were sort of tying these people down and chopping their intestines out. This is what the Spaniards said they witnessed. Unbelievable.
Apocalypto. Yeah.
Yeah.
Human sacrifice.
That's right.
And
it's a great movie.
That's right.
Terrifying.
So we should definitely call it Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah, really.
Indigenous Peoples Day, right? Instead of...
Well, now, here's something that's interesting that I think a lot of people miss, too. God, I'm on the Catholic bent today. I really am.
Today?
Well,
every day.
Every day. But Squanto was Catholic.
Really?
You guys didn't know that?
Mm-mm.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Squanto was Catholic. The Jesuits had already come through and done a lot of civilizing and converted a lot of the native tribes, especially like in, the Southwest, for example. But the Jesuits were the first to come through the Pacific Northwest. They were the first to go through New York. Auriesville is the site of a bunch of martyrs. But Squanto and the Indian tribe that came to the Pilgrims' Aid on the first Thanksgiving, they were all Catholic, going to help the Protestants.
Interesting.
Because they couldn't feed themselves.
They do have a lot of information on that at the Mission Church. Have you been there?
No.
It's on the way to Wallace.
Oh, the one in Cataldo, the one that Father DeSmet built.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
No. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah, the other thing, the overarching point, too, is that there's this myth somehow that the United States is a damned nation because our history is uniquely about conquest.
Mm-hmm.
That's absurd. Every nation's history is ultimately about internecine conflict in some way, shape, or form. Violence is the foundation for every society in the world. The United States is no exception in that regard at all.
Right. Yep. Invaded, conquered everywhere.
Right.
You know that history books say, at least in California, when I was in California, they say that Alexander the Great was like gay. Have you heard this before? Yeah, they say directly in the history book. Like I remember like one of my kids' friends like doing homework about how Alexander the mom showed me the book. She's like, look at this. They're saying Alexander the Great was
I think the primary source document for that is the Oliver Stone movie called Alexander.
It might be. Do we want to go through super chats or see if there's any that didn't pop up on screen with?
Were we going to talk about this documentary at all?
Which one?
Oh, the new one.
We could too. Yeah, we could talk about that.
Did everybody watch it? I did.
Which one?
By Now.
Which one?
By Now.
Oh, I didn't.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay. Well,
go for it.
I don't know if you've seen this documentary, but it's actually pretty good on Netflix. There's a few good documentaries on Netflix. Painkillers. Have you ever seen that one about the Sackler family?
Yes.
And about OxyContin. Like that was a really good.
The Octopus is another really
series.
Good. I think it's a 4-episode miniseries about the killing of Danny Casolaro and the Promise Software scandal. Really good.
There's a few. There's the Menendez brothers. Like that.
That was good.
That was pretty good. But this one was called. It was called By Now. And basically, just in time for the holidays, it was talking about like how corporations trick people, they enslave people into buying, consuming, and continuously like just being on this continuous cycle of purchasing, consuming, wasting, purchasing, consuming, wasting. And there was a really interesting part of this documentary where it was talking about Amazon and sort of the beginnings of Amazon. And they had this sentence on their website that said, if you buy right now or something of that nature, that we'll give you free shipping, or over $25 we'll give you free shipping. And it talked about how they ran like thousands of tests where they changed the color of free shipping from green to red to blue to orange. And they tested this not thousands of times, millions of times to see what landed best, until eventually their primary goal was to shorten the time that you have to think about the purchase that you're going to make. And they right now they have buy with one click. Like this was the ultimate goal of Amazon, just to click one buy and it just arrives in your house like the next day. And they talked about planned obsolescence. Do you know what this is? Planned obsolescence. So basically what it is that like your iPhone, your computer, your whatever that you buy is eventually, it's going to have a very short lifespan intentionally. And they said that that there are 13 million phones thrown away every single day. So
Well, have you looked at how many? I mean, they make billions of new phones a year. I mean, there's only 7 billion people on the earth. How many years does it take before you get, enough phones for every person? I mean, we're well past that point. Obviously.
Well, everything is like, how cars now are very hard to fix, right?
Yeah.
Computers are very hard to fix. iPhones, you can't really fix them. If you crack it open, they void the warranty.
Yeah, wasn't there just legislation actually about like being able to fix it yourself, or there was a name
right to repair.
Right to repair.
Right to repair.
Yeah,
because before the warranty was voided, and so a lot of companies are now having to institute this right to repair. But they made the back cover of the phones tamper-proof.
They changed the screws. Yeah,
and then didn't they? Wasn't Apple caught with some sort of software thing where basically, like, if you had a phone and then, once 2 upgrades go by, a switch is flipped and they start throttling your speed to make the phone act slower, even though there was really nothing wrong with it.
Right.
They got caught.
They got caught doing that.
And in this quest for having a better product and more net worth for every company, society is losing the ability to fix things. And I think that that's really the problem. Like that's what I'm more concerned with and how we're going to deal with all of this waste, although that's a huge problem. I was shocked with the recycling statistics.
99% of all the plastics. So anything you look at that's plastic, any paper bag, any water bottle.
No matter what it says is not recyclable. It's just going into a landfill.
It's just being buried.
Right.
Most of it.
But I mean, the long-term implication for us outside of the environmental damage with the plastics is that nobody is going to have any kind of specialty skill to repair or fix anything.
Right.
And that is a huge problem. I mean, what skills are people developing in our society when there is a societal collapse? What are we going to fall back on?
It's crazy.
TikTok.
That's right. There was a really interesting part about this documentary. It was there was a guy that owned this. He was like an investigative journalist or something, and he took because you can go to the dump and you can go to these specific parts of the dump and it'll say, well, we're going to recycle your computer or we're going to recycle your monitor or whatever. So what he did was he took 1,000 items or 2,000 items and he put geo-trackers inside of these items. He took them to those specific places that said that they were going to recycle those things, and he tracked it. It got shipped over on a cargo ship all the way across the ocean to Indonesia. I think it was Indonesia. And he followed this tracking device, and it was like a parking lot. And there was a bunch of Indonesian teenagers smashing these things up with their hammers, all this waste, and burning it and setting it on fire. And you see this green smoke going up into the air. And then he filmed this. It's crazy. It's crazy the amount of waste that people. They say that Amazon throws away $5 billion worth of product every single day.
Probably
$5 billion.
This is what happens when you have society based on usury and fiat money.
Or every year, rather. Go ahead.
Bitcoin's on sale. Black Friday sale, 93,000. Go buy. MicroStrategy.
That's right.
Go buy.
But yeah, plastics aren't recyclable. I think, and then they talked about how clothes, right? How much you go through clothes. And when the manufacturers don't sell the items, when they discontinue the items, they cut them up.
They cut them up so that nobody can use them. Yeah.
Right. Like Louis Vuitton purses, they cut them up. It just goes in the earth.
Well, sure. They'll write that off as a loss against their profits so that they pay less in taxes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's all a part of a tax evasion.
Why aren't we launching all this trash into space?
Give it to Elon.
Yeah. If he could deal with our trash problem.
What we need is to figure out how to capitalize on that and get our hands on these the industrial capitalist waste and live off of the decay of
It's true. Instead of complaining about the corruption, just become a part of it because it's over anyway.
Just become corrupt.
We're trash people now. Like that chick from the documentary who used to work at an investment bank, but now she just goes through corporations' trash. She's like a professional dumpster diver.
Professional dumpster diver. And has an account with 5 million people where she goes in these dumpsters. She finds these crazy expensive electronic goods and designer purses.
And then she finds out why they're throwing them away. And it's usually because they don't want to hurt the brand by having excess products out there.
Well, there's actually, it's kind of funny. I never thought I'd be bringing this up on a dissident right podcast, but the Beanie Baby movie. Did you guys see that? So there was a movie was it called Ty or whatever? But it's about the founder of Beanie Babies. And it goes through the story of, how they kind of became popular. But then, halfway through the movie, eBay is invented. And they start manipulating the eBay markets by only producing a certain amount of a certain kind of Beanie Baby or lying about how many Beanie Babies they created to artificially drive up the price on eBay. I mean, it's really interesting, but
that's what the De Beers family did with diamonds. Diamonds are not even rare. Every man, woman, and child on earth could have a handful, but it's been artificially inflated by the De Beers family.
Do I have to do an early life check on the De Beers family?
You don't. You really don't know everything you need to know. Diamonds.
Diamonds are Israel's #1 export.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was actually kind of interesting because I remember when we got engaged, I wanted to get a conflict-free diamond that was not sourced from Israel.
Did you ever find that?
It was actually impossible. They would not tell me the origin of the stone until I purchased it. And they do that as a way to prevent people from engaging in any kind of BDS activities.
Is that why they're called jewelers?
Whoa.
Is that Oh, you got
How long you been
Wait, how did you pull it out so quick? Go ahead, Cameron.
My secrets.
I
had nothing to add.
Nothing.
Neither on the trash or the conflict diamond.
I think the point is this is what they want for us, right? They want a slave class of people. They want to change the demographics to a point in all Western nations to where they can just import this slave class of people that aren't going to be the Karens that white people are, right? These are people that are used to having shit in their streets, that are used to having trash in their streets, that are used to seeing graffiti on their walls, that are used to seeing potholes in the street that the city never comes to fix no matter how many times you call them, that are used to having a catheter strapped to their waist as they work in an Amazon factory for 15 hours straight. These are the types of people that they want, people that are easier to control. White people are the hardest people to control. Look, during COVID, look who are the people that were speaking out the hardest, speaking out the most during COVID and the lockdowns and all of the tyranny that was happening. And
Republicans.
Right, yeah, Republicans. Yeah, it's Republicans. And so, this is, they sort of want this Ready Player One. Right. So that was one of the one of the slaves. Slaves screaming.
Oh my gosh.
One of our slaves.
You're gonna get my
back
kids
to
taken
work.
away from me, man.
No,
There's a tiny sweatshop upstairs.
Ready Player One scenario, sort of.
They got the little fingers that can get into places.
Just
they can
stitch
the screws.
so tiny.
to turn the screws in the back of the phones.
Well, they've been turning someone's screws today, I think.
But what's the lesson there, Vince? I mean, it's that we, as white people, need to stop relying on what is easy. We need to accept a lower standard of living, and we need to get used to that. And as women, we should probably reject fast fashion, although it pains me to say. And we need to get used to having less. That'll make us even more difficult to control.
No more Shein. No more Temu.
Temu's great.
No more.
Get out of here.
I love
He was
Temu.
just telling me how he loves Temu before we started.
I unironically love Temu. But when you go on Amazon, everything that you see on Amazon anyway it's a Temu dropship. Like, let's be honest. It's not like made in America, and that's why it costs $50. They're just marking it up from $5 to $50. They're making that much profit, you know?
Right.
That's what they're doing.
But
and so
you're becoming ungovernable.
you just go straight to China.
By being good at getting poor. Yep,
I outrun inflation.
Yeah.
You know.
Cam, how do we stop, like, how do we bring back, like, all this waste? Like, it's just crazy what this documentary was talking about, where you go through, they like these companies, they create like 15,000 new items every single year, and most of it just gets wasted. Like the plastics in the fibers that the clothing is made out of come into the washing machine and then go into our water supply. Like, if you want to get into a conversation about microplastics, like just how much waste that we go through, and you can't fix things anymore. Like, things don't last anymore. How can we return? How can we reshore manufacturing, you know, tariffs? Like, is there a way, or are we just too far gone?
No, I don't think we are, but I think you have to start with the financial system, right? The financial system is at the epicenter of all of it. I mean, if you think there's problem in waste management with recyclables, what do you think is going on Wall Street? Right? That's really where the waste management problem is. But typically speaking, I think at the end of cycles, and that's the way I tend to phrase it, you get this explosion of waste. You get corruption, you get moral degradation. But that doesn't continue linearly because it doesn't work. It's unsustainable. So we're going to have a financial crisis of some magnitude, probably significantly worse than 2008. And that's going to force a reset. The other thing to bear in mind, too, though, is that a lot of these corporations, they're not well run. They're not very profitable. They're financialized, right? So their stock price goes up, and there's all kinds of accounting tricks that they're using to sort of beef up their balance sheets. But if we get a significant enough financial crisis, you're going to get a complete economic restructuring. And that's where we're headed. This is why, again, not to bash on Trump too much, but it is my bailiwick, so I guess I'll do so. Sort of marginal changes to the tax code and tariffs, it ain't going to cut it. You have to have a restructuring across the board. And typically the way you get that is a financial crisis. One other thing I would note, it works the same way culturally. Right? So you get to these points where you have this blow off top of narcissism, hedonism, you know, a sort of overindulgence, and it blows itself out. And then you get a kind of awakening. That's where we're headed. We're going to see a cultural prohibitionism in the near future, if for no other reason than people are going to have to make more with less. And they're going to have to do that because we're going to have a financial economic crisis. I think it's already begun. I mean, what is it? 80% of the population is living paycheck to paycheck as it is, right? Now, we may be fat and we still have a lot to eat and so forth. But I think more than anything, that's kind of an illusion. So I guess the answer to your question is naturally. We're going to get there naturally because we're also sort of perversely fat. It doesn't work anymore. We've got to trim the fat.
Don't you think, looking at what Javier, and I might have said this last week, so forgive me if I did, but I mean, I'm kind of encouraged, right? I mean, like, if you look at Javier Milei and his connections with, you know, the Chabad group, and if you look at Donald Trump and his connections with the Chabad group, and then you look at what Javier Milei is doing in Argentina, slicing and dicing the government.
He's actually been pretty successful.
Yeah. It seems to me that the people behind Trump want to do that. It seems like they actually want reform in some way. Whether or not it's going to be good or bad in the long run, I don't know. But I think that,
they want reform.
I think that there's a chance.
There needs to be restructuring.
Yeah, but there's a difference between reform and I would say a kind of structural overhaul. And we need a structural overhaul. Right. I mean, that's basically where we stand today. I think Malay's done some good things. He's done some really bad things, too. It's a mixed bag. Yeah. And I understand people are going to say politics is the art of the possible. I understand that to some degree. But we need significant structural reforms. We have to completely reorg the government. And that's not what Trump is talking about. And I don't think he's capable of doing it. You have to have a crisis in order to get us through that process. That's one other thing to note about all this, too, is that the Industrial Revolution, the Agricultural Revolution, what we're going through today, it's messy, it's ugly, it's painful. It always looks this way, right? You don't click an on switch and all of a sudden everything's better. It's just not the way things go. But if you get those structural reforms, which I think are coming, then you're going to see a much more sustainable country. We need a crisis to do it, and I think we're going to get it. No elected official is going to bring it to us.
Yeah,
interesting. Very good. Very good, right. Cam. Very good.
Yes,
as always. yes.
The check from Putin will be in the mail next week.
In the meantime, just drown in your Biggie shake and your supersized fries.
That's right.
Enjoy the decline.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully hopefully you're not doing French fries and milkshakes this week. You're doing turkey and cranberry whatever and
stuffing. Cranberry sauce on stuffing is the best. No, cranberries like actual real.
Oh, yeah.
But do you like that? See, I like the cranberry sauce in the can.
That is asinine.
My wife
you
will
can
tell
mix
you.
it with
My wife
real
will tell
cranberries.
No. You take the can of cranberries, right? And you take the top off and you poke a little hole in the bottom, and you get the whole thing to come out in that like preformed can.
Oh yeah.
And then you just slice it into little circles.
Yep.
I do trust your wife in terms of the cooking.
That's the kind of cranberry sauce that I like. My wife actually makes real cranberry sauce from scratch, and
awesome.
That's good. Don't eat it. It's terrible.
But she's such a good cook.
She is such a good cook. I know.
The best
just a virtue signal to the diversicrats in the audience. I like to order Chinese food for Thanksgiving myself.
There you go. Taking a page out of the book of what is it?
Outsourcing Thanksgiving. That's right.
Shall we do some power chats? If you still want to donate, we are. What's the link?
Powerchat.live/thebacklash.
The Backlash.
The
Backlash. Do you want to go to it?
Are there any Rumble things?
I don't think we're
are you
even
logged into
live on
PowerChat?
Rumble, to be
I'm
honest.
logged into PowerChat.
Seriously?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to upload the. I screwed up.
Vince.
I don't think we're live on Rumble. It says I'm live, but it's not showing us. So, it's still on my loading screen. I screwed up the tag.
It's messing everything up.
I have to re-upload it.
You're going to be like revealing sensitive info if I go here. Where do I go? Creator dashboard?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Go to events. So as soon as you get to, click on events. Yeah, there you go. What was the last one?
During COVID. No, I don't want to read that.
Just read it.
During COVID, the blacks rioted all year and stole the election.
I don't know if the blacks stole the election, but certainly this is. And this
I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for the Beanie Baby questions.
Oh yeah,
that's what I want.
Richard Helms.
Wait. On that, I want to say something. I just pointed this out on Twitter. Something I noticed as I was driving. Tweeted it out. I'm a very good driver while tweeting.
Mm-hmm. That's illegal.
This is the first election where Trump is a candidate that there wasn't any major Black Lives Matter incident. So I don't know if that means anything, but it's kind of interesting.
They're placated. That's why.
Well, I was expecting there to be a flare up after Trump won. I was expecting like 2 or 3 months of fun and love and riots all over, but
nothing ever happened.
Nothing. It's
no
really
Black Lives
weird.
Matter event either. Like 2016, there was a big one. 2020, George Floyd.
I think also a lot of that, and we could probably get some people on that would be more expert in it, but I think a lot of the riots that were going on in like Seattle and wherever, I think a lot of that had to do with opportunity zones being declared in certain neighborhoods. And when you look at those riots and where the places that got burnt down, a lot of that actually happened in opportunity zones. So they were eligible for loans once they burnt down. So I think actually a lot of the rioting that we saw in 2020 was actually a scam.
That's an interesting
conspiracy theory. It was a real
estate
scam. Yeah.
Well, I think it was mainly just blacks who wanted free shoes. But
disavow.
Anyway, go ahead.
Disavow. Look up Operation Sea Spray.
That is an interesting conspiracy theory. Though.
What's that?
I like that.
Okay, hold on. Operation Sea Spray.
U.S. Navy's secret biological warfare experiment in which I'm so blind. Okay,
Serratia marcensis or whatever. Some bacteria was sprayed in San Francisco to determine how vulnerable a city like San Francisco could be to a bioweapon attack.
Is this
that
a
why everyone's gay
bacteria?
there?
This was in 1950.
Bacillus globigi.
It's
It's a black
disease.
pigmented bacteria. It's 2 different bacteria strains.
So they were experimenting on us.
You
huh?
know, they do say that gayness, homosexuality could come from a parasite.
I think that's what Milo says. I'm inclined to believe him.
Oh, look.
Well, Milo would be an
Prostate
expert
surgery.
on that subject.
He
I'm
would.
damn sure.
Truly.
Hey, everyone. Okay, excellent stuff, you guys. I love the new show. Trump winning is a setback, but I'm thinking a small one. When he betrays us again and fails to deliver, then that may be an even stronger wake-up call than Kamala winning.
Reinhardt's the best. He came over from the old show. You did send that twice, Reinhardt. We'll send one of those back to you.
We will?
Yeah, he sent this.
Sometimes it's not real, though, but you have to make
Oh,
sure.
wait. No.
Yeah.
No. He sent it to us twice. Yeah, we have to send one of them back. It's
For sure.
Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I think that we should focus on increasing our own capabilities and better our quality of life rather than try converting or creating new political parties. It will be better for everyone. I tend to agree.
Cameron does.
We don't want to convert.
I disagree.
Yeah, you don't want to convert, but yeah, I don't agree with that at all. I hear that all the time. And I think to some degree it's baked into the American ethos. You know, it's I got my gun, I got my land, stay away from me. History shows that loses. So I don't want to lose. I don't want to be on the side of the militia. The militia lost. It lost in 1812. It lost during the Revolutionary War. That's not the way you want to fight. You want to band together and you want to form a movement. Movements are powerful. It's why they've happened throughout history, and we can do the same in the United States. But I do think the previous comment is right. Trump is going to fail, and he's going to fail because he's been assimilated into the system.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody running around saying that Trump has learned from his mistakes in 2016. No, what's happened is he's been assimilated by the system. And I think that's sort of what Rebecca was implying a moment ago, which explains why there weren't Antifa and Black Lives Matter and other kinds of disturbances on election day. Even if your theory is right, that it was some kind of real estate play, again, I have to think there would be some form of disruption by somebody that's not controlled by above. There was nothing. That is suspect, to be sure. He made compromises, and I think his administration, the people he's appointed, reflect that compromise. And I think it's pretty clear if you pay attention.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you can go ahead.
I also think they didn't want to create momentum in case it supported Kamala. They wanted Trump to win.
I was going to say it is very suspect, and honestly, I don't know if Trump learned from his mistakes, considering the fact that he brought in Rubio, considering the fact that he brought in there's this rumor that Mike Rogers might be the FBI director.
What?
Which is crazy.
Oh.
So there's a lot of bad people.
I thought we were getting Kash Patel, man. I wanted the Indian with the crazy eyes.
He might still be. He's just gonna poop over.
Look, Mark, what is it? Mark Waltz, who's going to be his national security advisor, said that there's no daylight between his views and Jake Sullivan's views, who's the current national security advisor, who by most accounts is actually running the war in Ukraine. Okay, so yeah, that's a red flag. But even more than that, I was asked by several people in the lead up to the election if I thought Trump was going to win, and I said no, I didn't think he would. And my reason was demographic. I mean, the demographics in the United States are damning for the Electoral College. You know, red states like Texas are in big trouble. Okay, we know that. It's hard to believe that he won so decisively without being helped because he made certain compromises. I think that's the lesson that Trump learned.
Yes.
I think he made those compromises, and I said, okay. I think they paved a clear path for him. That's what I think.
Absolutely. I think he had to call in a lot of favors between 2020 and 2024, and that they're like, all right, now it's time to settle up, buddy.
Well, that's why all the pandering, right? I mean, only 2% of the population pandering to them, and 70-80% of them vote for Democrats. What the heck is the pandering for? Well, it's for the Adelson money. It's for the It's for the this, it's for the that. Some people say that the Mike Rogers rumor got debunked. It may have, but check this out. I mean, he brought in Christopher Wray in his first administration, and guess what? Christopher Wray never left. Why did Christopher Wray never leave? Because he was part of the deep state. So, when you have these sorts of things happen, and then, you look at what he just tweeted out the other day, or he put it on Truth Social or something. Trump released a statement talking about how Operation Warp Speed saved 130
Oh, I
It was a
saw
great
that.
success.
It was a great success. That's another thing. He has no humility.
Talk about not having the finger on the pulse of your
At
supporters.
all, right. I mean, that was probably the worst thing that he did in his presidency. He ushered in this era of COVID tyranny, and we were all slaves to it.
He was right at first where he said,
we're
no
not going to do this. It's no big deal. Yeah.
He should have trusted his instincts.
Right. He's responsible for the vaccine.
The sad thing is that, this is not about Trump. And again, I don't want to condemn the man too much. I mean, no one man is going to save us, right? That is the overarching lesson here, folks, is just let go of this fantasy that Ronald Reagan reincarnate is going to spontaneously materialize and solve all your problems. It's not going to happen. And why? Because Trump is one man and he's against a system, the same system that took down Kennedy in the 1960s. And I have this clear image when I was looking through my notes about Kennedy. What struck me is that here's Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs catastrophe, sitting there looking at his brother, Bobby, because Bobby's the only person in the government he trusts. Who does that sound like? That's Donald Trump looking at his family, because the whole government around him has sabotaged, subverted, isolated, and threatened to destroy him unless he played ball. This is what we're up against. It's a structure. It can't be fixed by one man in some election.
He loves his family. Barron Trump. You see that meme going around? I like my suitcase.
No,
have you seen that?
I haven't seen that.
Dude, pull it up right now. YouTube.
But Cameron, I think that people should be reassured by that. White people, they have a lot of ingenuity, and we are many, and we're people in many countries. And I think that people should be like, okay, we are going to save ourselves from this, and that should give us a message of hope.
What is this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, play. Can we hear it?
I like my suitcase. I have to go to school now.
Yeah, you will have lunch and then you go to school.
Now I'm gonna go.
Yeah, first you will have lunch and then you go to school.
I like
Now you can do reading, writing, and arithmetic.
He speaks with his mom's accent.
That means that she spent a lot of time with him.
It's become a TikTok audio.
Oh. And now he's 6'8". He's a 6'8" billionaire. So.
7'1". He's going to save us. He's the one man that's going to save us, Cam. It's Barron Trump.
Barron Trump.
Didn't people say he was autistic or something? I mean, there was a lot of mean stuff said about the kid. I feel bad for him.
Yeah, there was a lot of.
So we got Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours from Phil. Glad to see the new show is finding its footing. $50. Thank you very much for the big super chat, Phil. Next week you have a better. I hope that you have a better system for these chats next week.
We will.
Can't have bad things going on the screen or interrupting every time.
It's true.
No buffering.
No buffering. Right? We're getting better. I upgraded my Starlink. There was a firmware update. I relocated it, recalibrated.
Really?
Elon.
Yeah.
It looks great. I don't even see people bitching in the live chat.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Doesn't the BS Bidens prove why we shouldn't have a system where boomers can be elected?
Oh, yeah. We talked about this. Yeah.
I don't know. Okay. Hail Blonde, blah, blah, blah. What exactly are the differences between the Schofield Bible and the Normal Field Bible? We did that already. Oh, am I not looking at the screen?
Nick O'Lass.
Like the set. Thanks you very much, big
Thanks,
guy.
Man.
Happy to see you take off. Peter Quino and his references Ryan Dawson's JFK's work quite often. Yeah, Ryan Dawson, New Mech, I believe is the name of the documentary that he did. Very good documentary.
And if you guys aren't...
By the way, he's the only person that can speak on this subject. No one else can talk.
No one else is allowed.
No one else is allowed.
Richard Helms destroyed a massive amount of files. True. And then I think we just got a couple more. Operation Sea Spray. I'm disappointed Blonde didn't take my suggestion. Cognitive dissonance on X. But I'm happy that you left Soylent Boomer Cage Matt keeps himself in. Yo, you left the cage. A sorry sight for sore eyes when women put out sober realities about usury and living with less. Very nice.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
From Anonymous, it only lost because you are limited to your attachment to this dumb system. Why don't you simply do? Talking and arguing has wasted so much of our lives. We need hyper-competent elites. Weren't you begging for a right-wing Soros? Be that guy.
I don't know which person you're talking to, Vince.
Definitely do.
Need
a right-wing Soros.
True.
Cam's working on it with his thing.
We need to talk. Okay, Reinhardt says, we need to talk about goals for the future. Are we trying to seize power in the government in an attempt to fix this nation, or should we attempt to flee and build a movement in a state with the best chance at secession? Move to Idaho.
Yeah, really. I mean, that does put a bigger target on our head, though. I think that there will be a nationalist uprising organically that aligns with the level of hardship that we have to endure as a people. And that's always how it goes. I mean, in one way or another, during these periods of revolution, some kind of authoritarian government is the default. So I don't know that we're really going to have to do much. We need to start getting acquainted with the idea that we're going to have some infrastructure in place for when that happens. But that time is coming. I mean, people are mad. People are mad, and right now their necessities are met, but it's not going to be like that for much longer.
Look, it's already begun, right? It's already begun. I mean, I remember, I feel like a fucking boomer here, but I remember when the Tea Party scaled, and it scaled very meteorically, practically overnight. I remember there were, I want to say, close to 1 million people that showed up in, I want to say, September of 2009. This is right after Obama was elected. And of course, the lefty press went after it and tried to accuse it of racism and so forth. And the Tea Party was deathly afraid of that at the time. But certainly that was part of the motivation, because you had this man, this Kenyan foreigner who had been elected president. And that woke a lot of people up. I remember vividly that woke a lot of people up, because there were many, more than a few, that thought John McCain was going to win that election. So immediately after that, you get the Tea Party, which was a third-party movement. And then 6 years after that, you got Donald Trump, which again was a candidacy that came out of nowhere that everybody dismissed at the time. So this is sort of a building process. But as you said, Rebecca, and you're right, once we go into a crisis, it's going to kick into hyperdrive. My only point to people that I try to make again and again is the building blocks are already there. You got an alternative media. You've got alternative billionaires. We have these people. We know who they are. We just have to reconcile with the fact that the government as structured is broken. And people, for whatever reason, a lot of people don't want to accept that. They want to believe in incremental reform. Well, I think that ship has sailed.
And they still donate to your local Republican. They still donate to your top Republican campaigns, and that's where this money is going. It's like that's totally legacy. Like that, it needs to change.
It's a waste.
So give that money to the backlash.net.
Yeah, that's right.
The backlash.net/donate.
Absolutely.
You can give us Bitcoin. And the best part about it is that the Bitcoin you give us today is going to be twice as powerful tomorrow. So you should give us all your Bitcoin.
Is it? I don't know.
Cam, do you want to talk about your venture capital thing or no?
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Okay.
Let's do that later. But one other thing to note too, because I see this all the time, and I know this is going to be music to your ears, Rebecca. The elites. Look, I've met a lot of these people. I spent a long time in D.C., lived there 10 years during the Trump era. The elites are the most pathetic people you can imagine. These people are just clowns. These WEF bureaucrats who don't know anything about anything. They've completely run their agendas into the ground. They've sabotaged their own influence across Europe. And they've run the U.S. government into the ground, okay? And anybody that's actually operated or worked with the government knows how utterly buffoonish it is. So again, let go of the notion that these elites are all powerful. They are not, which means that they're going to self-destruct. That's what happens. We need a counter-elite. And that's ultimately the purpose of our show. It's the point of what's going on Twitter. It's what America First is all about. That's what we're doing. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. But don't think that some octogenarian named Donald Trump's going to save you. He's not going to save you.
And public opinion is shifting towards these self-made intellectuals, because you can learn anything that you need to learn on the internet now. You can read any book that you want to. And so I think people are looking towards others that don't necessarily have status, but do have education, even if they're self-educated. I mean, you tell somebody you went to Harvard now and they're like, cool, David Hogg went to Harvard. That doesn't mean anything. It just doesn't mean anything.
We do need those people though.
But it's not the people of before. It's not like your Ivy League educated elitist. I think he's right that they just, there's a high level of buffoonery. And because they don't have social currency anymore and they've overused their criticisms of us, people are getting called racist and they're just laughing now. It doesn't have the same power that it used to. So what are they going to do now? They're going to come kill people. It's like, you're really going to reform people and radicalize them. Yes. They're over-socialized.
The term is over-socialized. They're over-socialized, right? They're effete. They're foppish. They're very adept at having discussions about communism while they sip their latte at Starbucks.
Exactly.
That's about it. They don't know how to run companies. They don't understand the economy. They don't know anything about the military. These people are Class A nitwits, and they should be treated as such.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Did you really? Cameron's a proper gentleman. He never would.
And then
he never would.
This is good. We've been doing better, by the way. We've been swearing less than we did on the first episode.
It's difficult, but we're trying to bring a better product here.
Amen.
Big shout out to Anonymous for that last $5 there, super chat.
Thank you.
I do want to say something else before we close it out. Is that we there's a lot of jobs that you still do need a college education for,
of course,
right? Like they can finance, doctors, lawyers, shit like this. Like we need those people.
We don't need any lawyers. We don't.
Well, no, we need lawyers. No, lawyers is at like the top of the list. I've got like 6 or 7 people now that over the past 6 or 7 years I've encouraged to go into the law field.
You need a lawyer.
And it's paying off. It's great. Like
all I'm
if
saying
I need
is
business
don't throw
help,
college out the window. Don't throw, university out the window just because you think it's like we do need people who are.
Yeah, but don't go to school if you don't have a plan.
Right. If you're not gonna, don't.
Well, and there's also an element of knowing yourself, right? There was this guy who I used to know, really nice guy. He had some mental health problems. Like, I can't remember if it was like cerebral palsy or some sort of autism or whatever. But he had it in his brain that he was going to be a teacher. And it's like the guy cannot communicate at all. And nobody had the heart to tell him, buddy, you are not cut out to be a teacher.
Right.
And he went through 6 years of school. They took him for every penny he was worth.
Yeah.
They gave him his teacher certification.
And then he couldn't
get hired anywhere. Yeah. And so, you have to know yourself, know what you can do. Yeah. Like going to college is not going to raise your IQ. If you have an IQ of 100, it's going to be that. If you have no amount of like playing basketball is going to make you taller.
Right.
No amount of studying is going to make you smarter.
It is linked to crime, though. There was a study that was done that said that it actually said
basketball
that
is linked to crime?
Basketball hoops.
The
more basketball hoops that you have in an urban area, the more crime there is. No. I'm not even joking. This is literally true. Anyway, I gotta go. Go ahead. End it.
Sorry, I was.
Is that it? Did we get them all?
I think we did. I dare say. You need software engineers and technical people. I bet half of you don't even know about drones and warfare being used right now. False, actually.
Dude, this guy's like the drone expert.
False, actually.
Don't, come on, don't start. I gotta actually go.
We gotta go.
Okay.
Anyway, Andrew will buy some stock. Andrew will, if you can. I don't know if they're privately traded, but they're making some killer drones. Literally.
All right. On that note, on the killer drone note, thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving, you guys. And I want to give you a heartfelt thank you for coming over to the show. It really means a lot to us, for your donations, for your viewership. This is The Backlash. Cameron, Vince, Dave. I am Rebecca. Please check out our Twitter at The Backlash. Thebacklash.net is the website if you want all of our information. And we really appreciate it. We'll be back not this Thursday because it's Thanksgiving, but the following Thursday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to have another show at some point.
We're going to be back very soon.